3 little girls were stabbed in a town called Southport, which is a quiet town, a second-generation Rwandan immigrant. And the most frustrating part about this is that our bishops are absolutely silent on these issues. They speak up in favour of migrants, and this is the problem with the politicians. They're not acknowledging the concerns and the worries of normal people.
There are crazy things happening in England right now. Big protests on both sides of the immigration issue. We're going to have a conversation with Mark Lambert from Catholic Unscripted to get to the bottom of what is going down in England today. It does seem like it's on the brink of something big. Let's pray for peace there.
By the way, my name is Joe McLean. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
We've invited from Catholic Unscripted, Mark Lambert, to be back on the team to fill us in. Mark, good morning. Thanks for being on with us today. What is going on in the United Kingdom?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the fruition of many years growing tensions of unrestricted migration, which has largely been sort of part of the EU. Well, there are a number of issues, aren't there? One of them is the wars that have been going on in Africa and Iraq and one thing another over decades now. And that's been pushing people away from those areas as economic migrants to try and find safety for their families and one thing another. And we've coupled that then with the EU policy of open borders, which has allowed a large migration from the poorer countries in Europe towards the more affluent countries, places where people feel that they'll be safe, where their family will be safe and where they can earn some money. And that's been going on unchecked for years and years and years. We've now got to this crazy, I don't know if you've had a particular situation we've got with migrants coming across on inflatable dinghies being trafficked basically by people who are earning lots of money on it. So if you think the English Channel is only just over 20 miles wide, it's not that big, but we don't seem to be able to stop these small boats coming across at all. And if you couple all that then with the rise in aggressive militant Islamic attacks on individuals in the UK, there's a growing sense of the fact that this is going to be a real problem. And what it's down to, Joe, really is a clash of cultures, isn't it? Is that, like, I've got a very specific position on it, which is that we've lost our Catholic culture. We've lost our Christian heritage, which is the thing that made Great Britain great. And as a result, when you've got a strong culture coming in from Islam, and what they do is they look at British culture and they look at the debauchery that they see on the media, the way that, I mean, you can imagine coming from a culture where women are completely covered up to a culture where it's a lot more lax, and they don't really know how to deal with it, but they obviously make a judgment call that we don't care much about our women or our girls, and that, therefore they can treat them the way that they like. So that's become a growing problem in the UK. And then you've got this, because multiculturalism is kind of a new world order creed, then they're not allowed to report it. So they kind of cover up when there is a problem. Yeah, there's definitely trouble on both sides, Joe. and I think so the trouble is it's all getting lumped in together now. There was an incident in my hometown in Southend-on-Sea, which was like a machete fight between some thugs, but that wasn't anything to do with the Islamic thing. That was to do with the fact that we've got a train line that runs down the side of the Thames, so everyone from the city empties out into this sort of area, and there was a big party which was all about drugs and one thing or another, and whatever was going on, some sort of gang warfare broke out on the seafront. So, but that's then been conflated because the images are all coming across, aren't they, with all these other incidents. And there's very much, I don't know how familiar you are with the news, but there was 3 little girls were stabbed, I think it was last week, in a town called Southport, which is a quiet town. A second-generation Rwandan immigrant. So Rwanda is a 95% Christian country, so we have to be careful not to conflate that issue with Islam, where it's not anything to do with Islam. But basically, that this guy broke into a Taylor Swift dance studio for the holidays, for the summer holidays, and stabbed a load of little girls, which is just absolutely diabolical, whatever way you look at it. And you have to wonder, what's at the cause of that. But the trouble is that I think the mainstream media is very careful not to say it's Islam, or not to say it's, and genuinely, it wasn't Islam in this case. But for example, my own member of parliament, Sir David Amess, a couple of years ago was stabbed to death and that was by an Islamist who was protesting about the Iraq war and the war in Afghanistan. And the mainstream media then are very careful not to say it's Islam or to put it at the feet of Islam because of, what they call Islamophobia, which is a backlash. And really that's kind of part of what's broken out now. I think with all these things, you've got to try and be calm and recognise what's going on. And what's going on is that, groups of young men who are, in like the patriotic thing is very different here than it is in America. And not necessarily for the right, it's not the right thing, but it's been associated with sort of that nationalist patriotism has been associated with bad things in the culture, which I think that's a problem. And, we've got this, it's honestly, you could get right down a wormhole, but it's all the universities are all teaching that you can't teach empire. Like none of the kids are taught about the British Empire or the good things that we did. And in universities, they're teaching that white men are the cause of all the troubles in the world. So young people are growing up not really understanding what their culture is. But then you've got these incidents taking place, and you can see that the police very much have labelled those people who are protesting because they're concerned about immigrants as racists and thugs, and they're trying to police it to protect the Muslim population, who, to be fair, say, for example, with the Southport incident, were not to blame, and yet they had people coming up trying to burn the mosque down. And there are innocent people involved in all of these situations. And, it's not there. It's very, very difficult to, you can't condone this sort of, as Christians, we can't condone this sort of violence, can we?
Well, I've heard also reports that said they were burning hotels down where these immigrants were at. Is that true? Or they were trying to light them on fire at least?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, a couple of times. That's happened a couple. Absolutely appalling. And that's what I mean. We have to be very vocal in condemning anything like that, And I think that they let themselves down, these protesters, when they get violent. There's no need for that sort of thing. And the government has been clear that they accept the right to protest peacefully. But when you start seeing them looting shops, nicking sausage rolls out of Greg's Bakers and, vapes out of the vape shop, then, you've got to sort of say, well, it's not really justifiable, is it? Even though you can see the motivation is that there is a problem, there is an undercurrent in the culture, and it hasn't been dealt with by successive governments. And so there's a political angle to all of this that you share in the USA, which is this move to the centre that we see in politics, this idea that you win from the centre. And what ultimately happens, it seems so obvious, but what actually happens is that both all kinds of voters, the whole voting demographic then recognises that nothing changes. It doesn't matter whether you have the Democrats or the Republicans or Labour or the Conservatives, they're all trying to rule from the centre, and therefore there's very little difference to their lives. And that leads to apathy is one thing, and also disaffection with the political process. And the most frustrating part about this is that our bishops are absolutely silent on these issues. They speak up in favour of migrants without, and this is the problem with the politicians. They're not acknowledging the concerns and the worries of normal people, and they've got a right to be concerned and worried because we've got MPs being stabbed on the streets, not just by Muslims, but by right-wing extremists as well. There was another MP who was killed by someone who was a British person. So. It's right across the spectrum, and as I say, it's probably more if we had more intellectual understanding of what was going on. It's more to do with disaffection, I think, and the removal of any real understanding of culture. And of course, as we know, Catholicism builds culture. What we really need is a restoration. You know, Great Britain is England's, is Mary's dowry. And we should return to that with all our hearts. And that's what our bishops should be calling for. We should be explaining why the Catholic faith is the truth and why it changes your life and why holding people as, you know, inherent dignity as the most important thing, as the icon of the deity. That's what stops violence. You know, this is what we should be. But you don't hear anything, Joe. Why don't we hear anything? All you hear is they just parrot all the talking points, you know, from the popular press, really, and they're trying to go wherever the secular culture goes.
So what are the bishops saying? Are the bishops doing anything to sort of quell the violence, bring peace back to the streets or the people? I mean, what have they done?
Very little. We've had an announcement from, there's a lead bishop for immigration basically saying that, you know, it's wrong to be cross. And it is, like, he's not wrong in what he's saying, but it fails to acknowledge the main problem, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.